Constable Raiden Richardson.
Present.
Warren Michael Blanton. Brewster Elizabeth Taylor, present. Chatham Lynn Kleffner. Dennis Brad Kroll. Eastham Joy Brookshire. Falmouth vacant. Harwich Robert Bradley.
Here.
Mashpee Ernest Virgilio. Orleans Frank Hogan.
Here.
Provincetown Rosalind Garfield. Sandwich Sue Pomeran. Truro Peter Graham. Wellfleet Roger Putnam.
Here.
Yarmouth John McCormick Jr. County Commissioner Sheila Lyons. Minority Representative John Harris. Native American Representative Mark Harding. Governor's appointee Herb Olson.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you.
Next item is public comment. If there's anyone in the audience wishes to raise a matter that's not on our official agenda, please make yourself known. Seeing none. Next item on the agenda, excuse me, the Executive Director's report. I'll defer that until the gentleman arrives. And this next item, we would look for an approval of the September 17th, 2009 minutes. It has. Well, it's been moved and second that we approve the minutes. Have any questions, remarks, any corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. And oppositions? Abstentions? Thank you. Next item on the agenda, from the Executive Director. Yes. That's the one I just asked for, and we, yes. Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to let the Commission know that on October 27th, there will be it's sort of a kickoff for the SEDS implementation, the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy that we developed last spring, which was submitted in June and approved in July. We came up with 16 regional projects that were priority projects for regional economic development, and we'll be having a meeting with all 5 working groups on the 27th to look at particular implementation plans for those 16 regional projects, and I look forward to the annual review of the SEDS going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing. Madam Secretary.
The Cape Cod Commission will vote to accept or reject the Craigville Beach District of Critical Planning Concern, DCPC, nomination for consideration at its meeting on October 1st, 2009. If the nomination is so approved, the Cape Cod Commission will conduct a public hearing on Thursday, October 15th, 2009 at 3:00 p.m. in the 1st District Courthouse, Assembly of Delegates Chamber, Route 6A, Barnstable, Mass. At this hearing, the Commission will vote to accept or reject the proposed designation for adoption as a DCPC district by ordinance pursuant to Sections 10I and 10J of the Cape Cod Commission Act. This notice is being published as required by Section 5 of the Cape Cod Commission Act. Proposed DCPC boundaries. The nominated area is known as the Craigville Beach area in Centerville, Mass. The Craigville Beach area is bounded on the south by Nantucket Sound, on the east by the eastern boundary of Covell's Beach property, Craigville Beach Road, Marie Avenue, Old Craigville Road, and Red Lily Pond Road. The northern boundary is delineated by boundaries of parcels that have frontage on the Centerville River and or are of an elevation that provides landward views from Nantucket Sound and Craigville Beach. Properties south of Horseshoe Lane, properties south and west of Craigville Beach Road, and most properties south of South Main Street to the Centerville River Bridge and to the west by Bumps River. The western boundary on Long Beach extends to and includes parcel 185-040. For the nominated area, the exact boundaries are shown on the map submitted with the nomination.
Thank you. Senatori.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Kristy Senatori, Chief Regulatory Officer for the Commission. The matter before you is the Craigville Beach DCPC, and I'll provide you with a little bit of background, some of which I did provide for you at your last meeting. The Craigville Beach Centerville Village DCPC was established by ordinance in June of 2008. Implementing regulations for the Centerville Village area were approved by the Commission in August of 2009. However, the town did not provide the Commission with proposed implementing regulations for the Craigville Beach area before their deadline expired. Instead, through a resolution of the Town Council, the town began the process of renominating the district, the Craigville Beach District, as a DCPC. And this nomination was accepted for consideration by you at your meeting on October 1st. The purpose of today's hearing is to accept public testimony as to whether the area should be proposed for designation as a DCPC and to consider issues and goals related to the designation. And just to remind you, this Craigville Beach District that's being considered for designation is identical to the Craigville Beach District that was originally proposed and approved. The Cape Cod Commission Act requires that the reasons for designation be specified in a decision. The draft decision that's before you includes the required description of the area's critical concern to the region. It identifies the problems of uncontrolled or inappropriate development in the area. It identifies the advantages anticipated from development in the area in a controlled manner, and it includes specific guidelines for the development. Staff suggests that the Commission, like the Commission did last year, that this area can be designated as a DCPC. If you approve the designation today and forward this up to the Assembly of Delegates, the Town of Barnstable will have 12 months to propose implementing regulations for the district. In accordance with the Act, the implementing regulations should conform to specific guidelines for development. These guidelines are outlined in the draft decision. They are the same guidelines that were approved by you when the district was first proposed. I'll review the guidelines for you. Specifically, they call for the implementing regulations to protect community character, moderate the scale of structures, and preserve viewsheds, to guide site development to protect natural resources and historic landscapes and settings, and allow the town to support the locally owned small-scale economy of the village center and preserve character-defining uses in the beach area. The town should also consider and determine if implementing regulations are necessary to protect community character and viewsheds in the event of land division, to protect natural resources in the barrier beach, and for wastewater management near sensitive coastal waters. Joanne Miller-Buntich, Barnstable's Director of Growth Management, is here on behalf of the town, and I, along with other commission staff, would be happy to answer any questions that you might have at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions from the members, colleagues? Seeing none, would the town like to put forth its case?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As we explained when we were here 2 weeks ago, and as outlined for you by
Please identify
Senatori.
yourself officially, please.
I'm sorry?
Please identify.
Joanne Miller-Buntich, Growth Management, Town of Barnstable. My apologies. We're here today pursuant to a resolution by the Barnstable Town Council to renominate Craigville Beach DCPC. We have implementing regulations that were presented to the council, and we don't anticipate any changes to those. There was a procedural snafu, shall we say, that took place at the council that prevented us from getting a council vote before the District of Critical Planning Concern deadline on September 10th. And so we're poised after the Assembly of Delegates would conclude their process pursuant to your designation today, of course, to resubmit those to Town Council and bring this to a speedy conclusion. And we haven't, as was noted, it's the purposes are the same, the boundaries are the same, and the implementing regulations as we've drafted them, we believe, do support the purposes of the District of Critical Planning Concern. We've reviewed them in a preliminary fashion with your staff, and I believe that they have arrived at a similar conclusion. And so we ask you today to consider a positive vote pursuant to our request. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments my colleagues. Any comments in addition from the town of Barnstable, from the public? Seeing none, then I will entertain a motion to close the records in the hearing.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we close the record and the hearing. Any questions, comments, remarks? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Abstain? Thank you. I will now entertain a motion to accept the DCPC as submitted in its original form.
I so move.
It's been moved and seconded that we accept DCPC as submitted in its original form. Any questions, remarks? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Abstain? Thank you. It's approved or accepted. Next item on the agenda is to review and comment on the ocean management draft open management plan.
Hi, for the record, I'm Heather McElroy, Natural Resources Specialist. Over the last couple of months, the Planning Committee has been reviewing the state's ocean management plan, and they've prepared a draft comment letter to send on to the state, which they'd like you to approve at today's meeting. So I'm going to give a brief overview of the draft plan, try to keep that brief, but cover the points, and summarize the Planning Committee's letter. So, let's see. Yeah, maybe actually if you just turn that a little bit, I'll be focused. Oops. Great. So the Massachusetts Ocean Act of 2008 was signed in May of 2008. An Ocean Advisory Commission was formed, of which we had a representative attend. That was Stacy Justice, former Coastal Resources Specialist. The state, that commission held multiple public hearings through the fall and winter of last year to gain input and insight from the Commonwealth on what they'd like to see in this plan. The Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, EEA, issued a draft plan in June of this year, this past summer, and they've been taking comments in the intervening period through November 23rd, and EEA must promulgate the plan, a final plan, by December 31st of this year. The plan must address 15 planning principles known as the Ocean 15 outlined in the Act, and these include general statements and principles such as ensuring good stewardship of the ocean, preserving the public trust, reflecting the recreational and economic benefits of our ocean waters, and establishing or reflecting the value of the ecosystem. The plan must be implemented through the existing state permitting and review processes. The plan must be revised every 5 years, and the plan must also allow for appropriate scaled renewable energy development. The planners on this, which was really EEA staff, went through an extensive data collection process. They then analyzed that data through the creation of maps and other analysis, which I'll get into in a moment. They evaluated different kinds of management options for implementing this plan, and then they identified implementation components. Thanks, yeah. So just a little bit more into the data collection process. They collected data from multiple different agencies, entities, organizations that collect data on resources significant in the ocean. These include different kinds of fish, habitat, where the fish are present, birds, marine mammals, etc. They also mapped existing ocean uses that are significant to the economy. Where are the fishermen fishing? Where are people recreating? Where are they, sailing or recreational fishing? They also mapped wind and tidal resources. They mapped historic resources both in the water and on the land. And they identified and mapped special, sensitive, and unique areas, which are habitats, that's sort of the core habitat areas significant to a defined set of species that they felt were important. Next. They then went through a mapping process to get all of that data into a GIS database, make maps, and analyzed those resources against the uses that are allowed in the Ocean Sanctuaries Act. So the Ocean Sanctuaries Act, which preceded the Oceans Act of 2008, allows for very limited uses in the state's ocean waters. They compared those resources that they'd identified with against specific uses and identified activities that were either completely incompatible with a given resource, or there might be some potential to cite that use in that area given adequate permitting. So the prohibited areas they call exclusionary, and then there's this sort of second level which they identified as avoid. They then generated compatibility maps, and we'll get into that in a moment. So I'm going to just run through a couple of examples of what some of the data that they collected looks like. This is the commercial fisheries activity. The different colors show the level of activity. Next. The recreational fishing areas. Where are people recreating? Both of these data sets come from the Division of Marine Fisheries. Next. The wind and current speeds, again rated by the speed of wind and currents. This is the North Atlantic right whale habitat areas, data collected by the North Atlantic Right Whale Consortium Sightings Database, showing in the darkest red really where whales have been sighted most frequently. And it was from this kind of data that the Science Advisory Group determined what was the core habitat for North Atlantic right whales, and that's reflected in the next map. Oops. Great. So you'll see the this area here really corresponds with that dark pink area on the prior map. They went through this procedure for all of the significant resources that they had identified. Next slide, please. Yes? You want to go back?
Just on that, is it the line that's closest to the coast that goes all the way up? That's what they're saying? I mean, I saw that in the dark red. It was sort of within the arm.
Go back to the, if you just, yeah, that's it, great.
So all the gray shaded areas where they're feeling, I know that the dark red is where they're predominant.
Right.
But the gray shaded area is also their domain, is what they're
Right.
looking at primary.
In this example with the whale, the right whale data, I think that the most sightings have been in, there's actually a very dark area right there and right here and around Provincetown. Then this larger area, few less sightings, et cetera, et cetera. So they've graded it in that way.
Okay, great.
And I should have mentioned that the planning area for this effort is shown in the dark outline here. I'm sorry the colors haven't translated well here, but the planning area starts 0.3 miles from mean low water, I believe, out to 3 miles out. Those are state jurisdictional waters. And then, of course, there are additional areas like Cape Cod Bay that have been identified as part of the state's jurisdiction.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, so next. Here's another data set, shellfish and crustaceans, and the next one, other fisheries resources, also data from the Division of Marine Fisheries. And the Science Advisory Panel used these data sets together with other information that was available to them to compile the next slide, thanks, the special, sensitive, and unique core habitat area for what they're defining collectively as important fish resource areas. And on this, you can see that down here and up in the Boston area. Okay, so just as sort of an overview of the compatibility analysis, they generated these data sets, these maps, for each of the resources that they determined were significant, and then they compared those with each of the specific uses allowed in the Oceans Management and the Ocean Sanctuaries Act, and defined areas where activities could happen, that they were compatible or were not. And the result are the compatibility maps that are used in conjunction with specific siting and performance standards for each specific use proposed. And I'll go through an example there next. So here's an example map. Sand and gravel mining is one of the uses allowed under the Ocean Sanctuaries Act. Resources that they determined would likely be affected by sand and gravel mining include things like eelgrass, intertidal flats, something called hard complex bottom, important fish habitat, fin, humpback, right whale habitat, and roseate tern habitat. And that the uses that would likely be impacted in some fashion by sand and gravel mining could include both recreational fishing and commercial fishing. Next. So then they established whether either those resources or those uses presented either an area that should be exclusionary for that use, or an area that sort of the next level down, sort of the softer level, is avoid. Do your best to avoid citing that project in that area. So citing a project, for example, in an important fish habitat area, which I identified before down here, you'd want to avoid that because it's presumed to be exclusionary for sand and gravel mining. However, if you just need to cite that project in that location, then the state is proposing a standard called that they would adopt through their MIPA regulations, which is avoid or demonstrate no less damaging practicable alternative or provide better data. And we'll get into that in a little bit. Once you've gone through the citing test, essentially, then there are performance standards which must be met through the regular MIPA review process. And MIPA being the Mass Environmental Policy Act process. Next. So they made those maps that similar to the one that we've just seen for each of the different uses. This map is sort of the big picture. In compiling all of that information together, the state determined that the area of the Cape Cod Ocean Sanctuary, which is this red band here, should be prohibited for any development. So through this ocean management plan, that area, no development is allowed in the Cape Cod Ocean Sanctuary. They identified that two relatively small wind energy or renewable energy siting areas, one off the Elizabeth Islands, the other off of no man's land. This is where commercial scale wind energy projects may be sited. And they are defined as greater than 10 turbines. It could also accommodate another renewable energy project. And they've also identified here, this is the outside of state waters, but an area within federal waters that for a variety of reasons they feel is suitable for wind energy. The multi-use area comprises the majority of the rest of the planning area. It's this blue slash. And in the multi-use area, all uses are potentially possible. And however, they are governed by those siting and performance standards that we just discussed. Next. The plan is specific to say, though, with regard to commercial scale wind, it is prohibited in those areas. Community scale wind, which is less than 10 turbines, could be permitted there, provided that the selectmen or the town council or whatever the decision-making body in that community agree, and that an economic benefit to the community is demonstrated, and that the project meets the siting and performance standards.
Does that criteria pertain to the larger one, because it has to heavy? Does the larger projects that can be over 10, do they have to have a community benefit and the different things that you just cited that the smaller projects could have?
I can't say definitively, but my take is that no, that's not specifically called out. The state has effectively sort of implied that these renewable energy sites are sort of pre-permitted in a sense. The siting, at least, has been pre-permitted. They're not presuming that the MEPA process has been pre-permitted, but.
And you're also saying, if I'm reading the map right, there are these lines that are going across, and it looks like that's Martha's Vineyard there off
right.
the coast, and then there's Nantucket, and then there's this whiteout area there that's among the, dropped in the middle of the lines that are prohibited. Is that supposed to be Cape Wind?
That is outside the planning area because it is not state jurisdictional waters. That is technically federal waters.
That's federal water, okay. That's what that signifies. Thank you.
Yep. The plan is also specific to state that any turbine is subject to DRI review, or that comment is made within the community scale wind section. And it also specifies that there may only be 10 turbines sited within each regional planning area's planning area. So, for Martha's Vineyard, that is this area, 10 turbines. For us, it's 10 turbines within, the bay, the Sound, Buzzards Bay, etc. Next. Okay, so that's sort of the meat and the potatoes of the uses and how they interrelate with the resources. Then the plan continues. This is the last slide on the plan itself. There's a section on plan implementation and regulatory coordination, a brief section on the trust fund that needs to be established for collecting rent and mitigation fees and how those are dispersed. The plan addresses adaptive management, how it's going to respond to better data that may come along, and how it might respond between those 5-year revisions that are required as well. The plan also discusses incorporating better planning tools as they go along, including something called the Ecological Valuation Index, which is the EVI. So that's the plan overview, and then I will summarize the draft comment letter, which hopefully you all received by email and in your packets today. There are 5 main points in our letter, and then several additional more minor points. The main ones include jurisdictional concerns, including that the plan should clarify the Cape Cod Commission's and the Martha's Vineyard Commission's jurisdiction over turbine projects of any size. As I alluded to earlier, it makes it clear that we have jurisdiction over community scale wind, but not necessarily over commercial scale wind. The plan should ensure the Commission's ability to define appropriate scale. The plan should clarify that all projects that are required to prepare an environmental impact report are automatically developments of regional impact. EIRs are DRIs, which is something we're well aware of, but that was not clear in the plan. And we also are recommending that they require a programmatic EIR for the renewable energy areas, really to address the number of turbines that might be possible in those areas. There are potential changes to the state's environmental regulations beyond this plan. What those changes might be are not clearly defined in the plan, and that is a concern. Next. There's this new siting standard for the MEPA process, for the environmental impact reports, which we discussed earlier. If you have to locate your project within one of those core habitat areas, then you have to demonstrate that there's no practicable alternative, or that there's better data that says that the resource in question isn't there. This standard, we feel, has the potential to really let additional development into sensitive areas that might not be appropriate. Next. The plan does not at all adequately address scenic and cultural resources. We feel that this should be remedied both through mapping those scenic resources, much the way they did all of the other resources in their compatibility analysis. Also that scenic values should be reflected in the siting and the performance standards. And then I believe the last main point of the 5 is the trust fund administration. The plan acknowledges that there's a lot left to be done on the trust fund. We're just encouraging them to flesh out the details before they promulgate the plan on how fees are collected, both for mitigation and rent, for projects that happen in public waters, and also how those fees are dispersed, and et cetera. Next. All right, and then quickly, I know this is a lot on this slide, I apologize. The additional comments briefly are that we support many aspects of the ocean management plan. Its structure seems sound. The plan should go further in identifying prohibited areas. They've defined the Cape Cod Ocean Sanctuary as a prohibited area, but it seems appropriate that there may be other areas to prohibit certain kinds of development. More is needed to protect ecosystem health. I think the plan doesn't adequately consider incremental development in the ocean waters that may ultimately erode the overall ecosystem health. We need to ensure that stakeholders are involved and their concerns are addressed through plan revisions. We'd like the planners to discuss how they arrived at the wind turbine cap, that those 10, a limit of 10 community scale wind turbines within each planning area. We have concerns about cables, which is an allowed use, crossing the Cape Cod Ocean Sanctuary. So projects that might be located in federal waters, how will the plan address that? Also, the plan should address decommissioning developments, and we're also encouraging the state to renew and vigorously address energy conservation, which is integral to the success of the plan. So the action that we're requesting from you today is to vote to approve the letter commenting on the draft ocean management plan. This is per section 3L3 of the administrative regulations. I'm happy to take any questions. There's one small amendment that I just wanted to bring to your attention before we get into that, which is that on page 2, item 2, the potential changes to MEPA regulations, that title there, should actually be potential changes to environmental regulations, as it's beyond, it would be regulation changes beyond just MEPA regs.
Thank you. Any comments, remarks, corrections? Yes, Peter.
Thank you for your presentation and the letter. It's wonderful, it really is. I'm kind of reminded of what Joy Brookshire position on this thing when I first thought that it was kind of something that maybe we should nonchalant, and I was educated differently. So, and I applaud us, you know, putting our pick up and establishing our jurisdiction in very firm terms with the people that need that. There is, however, you know, in this letter still, I think it vacillates from some rather soft language into hard language. It seems to run from one paragraph to another. I do have the right draft. This is 10/13/09 is the right draft. This is not, and this one's been changed since our meeting. Okay. So just to launch into it really quickly, the second paragraph on page 2, line 10, line 13, both have shoulds in there. I think we could put a little harder language than the should language. Needs be revised, for example. I don't want to wordsmith this thing to death, but the point is that some of these shoulds and mays and, for example, down line 17 in that same paragraph, the 2 regional planning agencies can prepare regulations. Well, maybe maybe there's something stronger there that may be more appropriate. Also, renewable energy areas in line 19 and may have a different set of parameters for community scale wind projects. As I go on, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. The 5th paragraph uses an ought, which I think can be stiffened up a little bit. So my comments are primarily in steeling up our attitude to this plan and those proposing it, and letting them know in no uncertain terms that there are things here that we really feel merit our defending. And I think in no unequivocal terms that it needs to take place. For example, on page 3, that State of Rhode Island paragraph, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 down, it has 4 shoulds in it. And the last paragraph has a should in it. And I don't mean to, well, I don't mind beating a gong. Page 4, trust fund administration and disbursements, final OMP should again. Then we go down to additional comments. We have 1, 2, the 3rd paragraph under additional comments, there's a should and there's a we believe. I think we pretty well know that will have to be substantial public and expert vetting of the data and policy decisions used by identifying the SSUs. So I think, you know, some of this on the 5th page, the 2nd paragraph, we have a we would like, and the 3rd paragraph down had the plan should discuss. I think it has to discuss how wind turbine caps were determined and why 10 were defined as a utility scale. So I would be happy to share this if it merits consideration. So thank you. But I don't mean to be critical about this, but it's a great letter. You know, we've worked this thing over and over, but I really think it needs to be very steely and have a real nice backbone to it in all elements. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Heather, I just have a question. As this process was continued for however long this has been going on, it's a while, as I recall, what really worries me is when you start to map things like right whale habitat or, you know, lobster migratory routes. all of these things are intensely subject to water currents, changes in wind patterns, temperature, salinity, food sources, and they're very movable. I mean, I hope that this was well realized when these maps were done, because these things, especially with the changes we're having in climate, can have very dramatic changes in all of these areas, and it directly affects the animals very quickly.
To respond to that, I think what I understand from attending the meetings that I have attended, the planners were very well aware of those concerns. They also realized that there were data sets that were not adequate, that they were given a mandate to complete this plan in a very short time frame, from May '08 when it signed and then basically completed. I think that the inadequacy of much of the data led them to maybe soft pedal some aspects of it and not go as far as they might have in prohibiting certain activities in certain areas because they are significant for a specific resource. The plan also has an extensive section on how it will respond to new data, and both between at the regular 5-year revision mark, but also between plan revisions, the opportunity to incorporate better data. So the plan is designed to be a living document, is what I've understood.
If I may continue for just a second. Thank you very much. So these maps and all the data is not carved in stone, because with a dramatic current change, the right whale feeding grounds will change with the food, and that could dramatically change from a protected area to one that's wide open. Mm-hmm. And will they be able to react to this? Is this really a document that will be very flexible and change with time, or is it going to be a very hard process once it's carved in stone?
I think the simple answer is we don't know. This is a plan by the state, and I will remind you that one of the E's in EEA stands for energy. And so there's been a balancing. I think, Elizabeth, you've hit the nail right on the head as to why this is one of the first attempts at ocean zoning on the planet, because of the migratory nature of what we're trying to control out there. And when you introduce lines, you introduce legislation, you introduce politics too. I mean, the thresholds set in the Cape Cod Commission Act 20 years ago were expressly intent to be temporary in nature, and they have never changed. So I'm sympathetic with your position. We can only continue to push the administration to make sure that this plan remains as flexible as possible. And what I would point out is the EEA staff has done a tremendous job with the existing data sets that were available to come up with these lines. And I think they've tried to minimize those areas where fairly significant development could happen right now. So there are those areas where they are basically saying they can't have any development, small number of areas where they say they can be development, and then there's a lot of area, probably 80% of the plan, that's maybe. And it's maybe because they don't have enough data in those areas yet to draw a lot of those lines. But I think your comments are good ones, and they underline the reason why we need to be vigilant with this plan going forward.
Go.
This letter is going to a person who, Director Darren Babbitt. Now, is this director, once that person receives this letter, is that person have the authority to make the final document?
He's been directing the planning effort, so I think in conjunction with the Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs, yes.
Okay. And we're being, I'm very interested in Peter's comment. I'd like to try to make a point. You know, the thing is, if we've been asked to participate by making our recommendations, you know, I'm not, you know, I think the word should is probably a more appropriate word than shall. I think shall be to the people who are making the final document, and and maybe there needs to be a separate letter, or a paragraph, I don't mean a letter, but a separate letter. You know, these particular items, we think, should not be left to chance, but should be firmly stated somehow. I'm not clever enough to sit here and to tell you what I think the wording ought to be, but I do think that we need to communicate some things that we think are, you know, extremely important, and they not only should be, but they shall be, but we need to tell them in a way that you would tell somebody who's asking you to make a comment.
Yeah, if I might, the planning committee, and Peter's been there, has spent a lot of time stiffening the resolve of this letter, and we hope that the tone is appropriate. Sometimes when you get into tense issues on particular matters, it's a question of us not really having the authority to mandate something, so really only left with the word should as sort of advisory. So we hope that it's appropriate in tone, and we will certainly revisit those areas that Peter pointed out to see if we can tighten it up even more. Nobody should read this letter, put it aside, and have any confusion about where we stand on the issue. But at times, I think we can't say it shall, or if we don't have the authority to mandate that it shall, just from a tense perspective of tense. So I think we can focus more on tone and less on tense. We can get to where we need to be.
So, yes, Jack.
Have you had any indication, Heather, of when they might have another draft, or, I mean, after they receive comment and so forth?
I believe there will be no intermediate draft for the public to review. Their final comment deadline is November 23rd, and they have to promulgate the final plan by December 31st, just a little over a month later. So I think we will not see an intermediate version.
Yeah, Jack, I can guarantee we won't see another draft. This is all that we'll see until there's a final plan. So this is our opportunity to make comment, and then they're going to issue the plan. Even the advisory committee, as we've gone through the process over the last 18 months, hasn't been privy to some of the drafts before they've been made available, and that has to do with this extremely short time frame of 18 months to do a really large project.
As it's been suggested then, perhaps, as Roy suggested, if we use should, we should emphasize the fact that we think it be firm. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions? And don't look at me. I'm certainly on the side of being assertive, and I'm not going to use the word shall because I've been relegated to the woodshed about. But it is very important that we, and we read the letter and we discussed this at the last planning meeting, that we've probably taken a position in this letter that allows us to emphasize what it is we want and also not come in with a big heavy hammer in each particular paragraph, because it's obvious when you read the letter that the commission is interested in not having its position deteriorated and undermined. But also we need to work with the organizations that are supposed to be involved in writing these policies and implementing them, so that we want to take a position there that we are received as though we are prepared to discuss, compromise, and be involved in the process. So that's why I stepped away from it. Because I have a very bad habit, but I got a nice comment from someone that said not to be heavy-handed, so I'm not being heavy-handed. However, I'm only speaking for one person, and I think that it's important that we address this from all of the commission's standpoint, because it is in fact a position that we are taking.
Yeah. Yes. And I think it's important for us to get on the record as soon as possible. The earlier we get our comments in, the more likely they are to make a difference. But I would call the commission's attention to the actions of the Martha's Vineyard Commission, who have declared a DCPC out to the 3-mile line around the entire island, because they're afraid that if this plan issues on December 31st, there'll be a rush. And they do not have the regulations in place locally to really sort of handle that or understand that. So as much as we want to focus on having a clear letter that sets a serious tone and leaves no margin for error, I can assure you this commission will have an opportunity to do more than write a letter. It will have an opportunity to act very soon to make your intentions known.
Thank you. Any further comments? Then I suppose what you want is for us on a majority position to approve this letter in its current form with the one correction, and I didn't exactly see where you were talking about, but
Page 2, item 2 is just the title. It should change MIPA to environmental, and then that will be more inclusive.
so when are you going to make this letter available for me to sign?
Well, we can either, depending on your pleasure as a board, I can make it available this afternoon and send it off. Or if you would like to adopt Peter's suggestions, I think you could authorize John to approve those changes, and we could do it next week, before your next meeting, I guess.
What did you say?
I yield.
Okay. Thank you. Welcome to the woodshed with me. Okay. Then, however we make this correction, what I would then, oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to suggest here that perhaps the best thing to do would be to authorize the commission staff to reword the letter insofar as it is practical to meet the requirements or the suggestions of Mr. Graham. That if the staff gives another whack at it, they may come back with something that suits all of our purposes. And therefore, I would suggest that we not act on it, but return it to the staff to rewrite, to try and conform to the requirements, more nearly conform to the suggestions of Mr. Graham.
I would quite agree with you. However, that's exactly what we've done about 2 weeks ago.
Got to do it again, then.
Well, we got to this point, and I'm certain it's going to come back the same way, but we can certainly go back again.
I can go further. I'm capable of that, if that's what you like.
Thank you. Of course. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, well, what's the pleasure of the commission? Want to send it back and they go through another rewrite? What deadline do we have here? Are we concerned with it? Because
Well,
now we're going to be two weeks down the road.
Yeah, I think Paul made that point. I think we're all feeling that we'd like to get our comments in sooner rather than later. So if you'd like us to go away and revise, I can do that tomorrow. And whenever John is able to come back in the office, if you authorize John to approve those changes, then he can sign it and send it off.
Will you trust me, Roger?
With pleasure, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, then we will turn it back to the group, but Friday, because if you call me Friday, I can come back here and sign it.
Okay?
But what you should do is send it to me by email so I can quickly read it. Okay? So
Would
the
you like a
motion, excuse me.
on that, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Jack.
So moved. We leave it in the hands of the chairman to review the final letter and send it at his pleasure.
Okay, let's get it all straight. Then what we will do is to take this existing document, revise it to stiffen up the shoulds to be semi-shells or shells, and then I will sign it on your behalf. So is that a motion from?
That's a motion, and I will move that the document be approved, subject to changes and the approval of the chairman.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda is other business that we may have. Yes.
Yes, on behalf of the Human Service Department, I would like to an extended invitation that on the October 23rd, there is a American Disabilities Act training, and they are hosting that here in this building, I believe at 10 o'clock in the morning. Don't quote me on the time, but it is the 23rd. So it is open to all employees and other municipalities who wish to join us. Also, on the 30th, I know that last year you had Mr. Giannotti down here from the Ethics Commission. There has since been changes made to the law, the ethics law. He is coming on October 30th at 10 o'clock in the morning here in this room. This is an invitation to all employees, department heads, commissions, and our neighboring, we've invited towns and neighboring municipalities that they could send their
people so that their elected officials,
so that they can be covered. It is required by law that you receive this training and this update, and you can have it all done in one fell swoop, and hopefully we'll have some fun while we do it. And the other thing that will be on the agenda coming up, I will give you the date when that's available, is that we will do a similar training on open meeting and the changes that have taken place in that. But that is October 23rd for ADA and October 30th for ethics training. So thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments, questions? No pontification. Then I will obtain a motion to adjourn. Yes, we did. It was quick. It was very quick. Yes. So, can we have a motion to leave, please? It's been moved and seconded that we adjourn. Thank you very much.